What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm going to be rating every card that appears in Spotlight Caches this season for Avengers vs. X-Men. We're going to do a little bit of a tier list throughout this video, but before we get to that, if you can wait just one moment, I want to discuss some things that I think are just important beyond these individual ratings, some evergreen tips to just take with you and how I personally make the most out of my collection as a free-to-play player. The first tip is just to wait. Just slow down. Just a little bit. And that's important for a lot of reasons in Marvel Snap, but a new card is gonna come out every week. Partially wait means you don't need the new card every single week, and if you want to be a free-to-play player making the most of your collection, means waiting. It means always waiting until you have 4 keys, till you open Spotlight Caches, so that way you know you're going to be able to open what you are targeting. And it also means sometimes just waiting and letting a card that is pretty cool pass by and waiting until the next card that comes up. But the other reason that waiting is so important is because you don't necessarily need to buy something until you get more information. And I'm putting this video out kind of before most of these cards come out. Mockingbird, Cannonball, and War Machine are not released yet. And I'm kind of going to give some advice on those, but I'm not sure if I'm right. And if you really want to make the most of your in-game resources, consult a variety of different opinions after the card has been released, and maybe just don't play with it the first day. And I mean, some of these cards are probably going to be good, and we can have a general idea of what cards are going to be good and what cards are going to be bad. And that's what I'm trying to do here. But it's just to say, like, yeah, I might get some things wrong, and make sure you are getting as much information as you can, because information is definitely on your side. Now, interestingly, waiting would also let you know that some things change from season to season. The original graphic that they put out with the season release video was incorrect, and this is actually how cards are going to release this season. So I kind of lucked out by waiting and not initially releasing this video at the start of the season or before the season even started, because I would have gotten some things wrong with, they just switched the order of Miss Marvel and Ghost Spider. Not a huge mistake, I would say, but it definitely changes how I am approaching Spotlight Caches this season. So for a bunch of reasons, the more you can wait, the better off you are. I also mentioned that you want to open up when you have 4 caches. The other big tip is to consider the fact that you are probably going to get, or 4 keys, you are probably going to get about 4 or 5 keys each season, which means you can generally pace yourself to be able to open up 2 new cards each season, or I should rephrase that, to target 2 cards each season. Miss Marvel is arguably new this season. We'll get to her in a moment, but this is the first time that she's appearing in Spotlight Caches in Marvel Snap. So that kind of makes her a new card in some capacities. But the point is, when you are getting about 5 keys per season, each card, if you are targeting 1 card in a given week, will take about 2.5 keys on average to open up. So if you just want Pixie, it's going to cost you 2.5 keys if you average all player experiences over time. If you are looking for 2 cards in a given week, I believe it takes 3.3 keys. Basically, you're looking to spend all 4 keys on that 1 week. So budget accordingly and make decisions earlier in the season about which cards you're going to open based off how much you are thinking about wanting other cards. And the other tip kind of with all of this and with waiting, if you're like on the fence about some stuff, then potentially consider saving keys for future seasons. And I put my money where my mouth is. I only got 1 new card last season. I got Corvus because it seemed really good with what I was, or is that what I got? No, I got Obsidian Cole. I got Cole Obsidian. Sorry, I just forgot the name of the card because they both start with a C, or they both have a C in them. Apologies. I got 1 new card and it was Cole Obsidian last week. Yeah, they both do start with a C. All of that is to say, because I did not get Corvus last season, I now have more flexibility this season in terms of how I'm going to spend my spotlight caches. So for all of those reasons, waiting is important. And with no further waiting, let's get into the review. So first off, we've got 3 cards coming on this first week here. We've got Pixie, Mobius, and Spiderham, Pixie being the newest card, so I will keep this displayed on the screen to kick things off. And I'm going to start by looking at the newest card, Pixie, and this is my S tier pick for the month. I don't know if Pixie will be the strongest card, and by the way, this was my thought on Pixie before I've now seen it come out and see some people play with it, but my thoughts really have not changed. Pixie is such a unique effect that I think it just allows you to build in different ways and adds a lot of value to your collection. So if you are an endgame player and you have most of the cards in the game, you might not be as interested in Pixie because you're like, okay, I know what I like, I know what I don't like. I'm not really interested in something this specific that's like, they're not letting me play like my Shang-Chi's and my Zabus and my other good cards. I'm not super interested in Pixie. However, if you're a newer player and you maybe don't have a top tier deck yet, you can pick up Pixie, and she's creating new archetypes. She's played in a variety of different decks, and I think that just gives you so much opportunity to maybe not have a deck that is a tier 1 deck, but might give you multiple different options for tier 2 or tier 3 decks in a way that I think is really interesting. I said similar things about High Evo when that was in Spotlight Caches maybe 2 months ago, and I did a video similar to this. I think that was January, right? High Evo is not the best card in the game, but it's like a pretty good card, and it also immediately unlocks an archetype that you otherwise would not have access to. And I put Pixie in that same camp in S tier for just giving you, this is like a solid build around. This is not a role filler. The other 2 cards that we're going to see this season are, or this week in the Spotlight Caches, are definite role filler cards. But like, you're not, I mean, you kind of can build a Mobius deck. Mobius kind of does work alongside Pixie. So maybe Mobius is kind of an outlier because of Pixie, but for the most part, Mobius is just a role player card. But I do think that Pixie deserves a strong consideration for if you're only going to open up 1 Spotlight Cache this season because you are low on resources and aren't sure how many of the newest cards you can grab. I think Pixie might want to be that one. So that is my main recommendation to kick this video off with, and I'm going to place these other 2 cards right here. So Mobius is a really strong card, and I just did a video yesterday covering the top 4 of the Community Gaming SEA tournament, where Mobius appeared in 3 of the top 4 deck lists. Mobius is really good. It's also specifically really good with and against Pixie, so it's seeing even more play right now. But overall, I just think that it is a really strong effect and definitely something that you don't mind picking up. It's never going to be like a must-have card. It's just going to be something that is either good or bad for a given metagame. And that's why I think that it probably will land at a B tier. I might adjust some of these other tiers throughout the rest of this video, but I feel pretty comfortable throwing Mobius in this slot. Spiderham, I would say, is a similar card in that there's decks that it's good against. It is kind of a tech card. It's answering cards from your opponent, and most lists that can include Spiderham don't actually need to. But it's a fine card and it can do some interesting things. I actually think Spiderham has potentially gone a little bit up in stock recently for 2 reasons. One, bounce decks, which are somewhat more popular now with Hope Summers, the season pass card. and then also Coal Obsidian. Just being a good 1-cost card that can be supported in a variety of different decks is pretty good for Spiderham when it also allows you to play a 4/10 at that location later on in the game. So Spiderham potentially rising in stock, but I'm going to keep it at C tier for right now. Moving on to Mockingbird, I think that this card is really good, and I think that Mockingbird is the most powerful card being released this month, which I think is possibly going to surprise some people and makes it a little bit weird that I'm putting it at A tier. This thing is just so good. Let me switch over to Mockingbird right here now. So costs 1 less for each card you have in play that didn't start in your deck. And I did get some confirmation from the Second Dinner team what exactly constitutes starting in your deck and not starting in your deck. Basically, like any type of squirrel token or stuff like that. I think the most obvious one is going to be Thanos' stones, but squirrels, if your opponent gives you a green goblin, that counts. Similarly, any cards that are generated throughout the game, either through Moon Girl or even from Loki, all of those things are going to count towards discounting Mockingbird. And there's a variety of different ways then that you could see Mockingbird become a little bit cheaper, maybe in some interesting Patriot lists. I'm not sure if Mysterio's clones will work. Let me, he won't get back to me, I'm recording this way too late at night. Yeah, so I'm not sure about Mysterio's clones, but maybe I'll like I'll leave in the comments if Mysterio's clones work or not. All of that I think is kind of a distraction. Thanos stones make this thing cheaper. It's going to regularly and pretty easily be a 3/9, which is pretty busted. That's bigger than Gladiator and doesn't come with a drawback. Just means you have to do things that you're already doing already. And then it can easily as well be a 2/9, which is just absurd. You do have to build around it. You do have to play Thanos, but just raw power level. I think that Mockingbird is insane. I think that Hope Summers Thanos is already probably going to be a really busted deck, and Mockingbird just makes that even better. That's not necessarily for free-to-play players to be able to utilize just yet, but if you are buying the Season Pass and you do enjoy Thanos, Mockingbird, I think, is just absolutely insane. I think that this card is really, really powerful, and the one caveat that I will say that is kind of an interesting dynamic in evaluating Marvel Snap cards, I think that there's no shot that this thing stays a 5/9 forever. I think this thing could be a 5/7 and still see a pretty large amount of play. 5/9 is one of the bigger 5-cost cards. And this is not a 5-cost card. This is a 4-cost or 3-cost card very, very easily. And in your nut draws, when you draw all of your stones, okay, let's just picture this. You get Mind Stone. You play it turn 1. Turn 2, you play 2 more stones. This thing costs 2 already, and all that you used your turn 1 and turn 2 for it. But as far as your deck is concerned, your hand is concerned, you've only played 1 Mind Stone, and the Mind Stone replaced itself with 2 more cards. So this is very, very easy to high roll with as well, and I don't see it staying a 5/9 forever. It just seems way, way too good. One card that seems way, way too bad for me though still is Ghost Spider. I have yet to play with this card, and it's a little bit me like admitting some ignorance here. I'm not familiar enough with different Ghost Spider strategies, and I do know that it sees some play in the Phoenix Force deck, right? I don't think that's enough to move the needle, though I do know multiple top 100 players do use the Phoenix Force deck. But it's not like other cards in here are unplayable either. Like Bounce plays Spiderham. I'm not sure if I got to say that out, but that doesn't make like Spiderham like insane, even though it's a pretty good card in what has been the top deck on the leaderboard. It's kind of a weird thing. I think that there's still, like, if you just look at like tier list by play percentage, Spiderham is still not super well represented as far as like win rates and things like that go either. And Ghost Spider, I think, is gotta be significantly worse than Spiderham. It really only goes in the one deck. Other move decks really are not a real thing. If you do enjoy move decks, I would say, I guess, stop. But if you specifically enjoy the Phoenix Force move deck, then, well, you shouldn't because you don't have Ghost Spider yet. But if Ghost Spider will be the last piece that then allows you to play the Phoenix Force move deck. So here's an interesting thing. Pixie feels like with just one card, you immediately open multiple new archetypes. Ghost Spider, I would say, is the opposite of that. You need to have Ghost Spider, you need to have Phoenix Force, you need to have all of these other specific cards, and your reward for that is one specific deck that they all go in. It's not a versatile card. It goes in one deck that also requires other specific things. If you enjoy that one specific thing, it can certainly be a route that you can go towards building your collection, but things higher up on the tier are going to give you much more options, and when you have more options, that also gives you more affordability to wait towards purchasing other things. Because there's a variety of different decks that you can put Mobius in if you have it. So already, you buy Mobius, you only need 11 other cards to make most decks, because you can kind of throw Mobius in a variety of different things and justify it. Ghost Spider goes in one deck, not my favorite deck. So there you go. Man-Thing, I think, is pretty similar. However, when you look at the data, Man-Thing is, it's on lists. I don't know what Man-Thing goes in. I don't actually have it, so I have not played it. I will say one thing kind of a bummer for me. Is it this? Yeah. So March 12th here with Mockingbird, Miss Marvel, and Man-Thing. All three of those cards, well, obviously I don't own Mockingbird, but Miss Marvel and Man-Thing I don't own, and that was going to be a 3 new card week for me, so that would have been sweet, but unfortunately did not work out. All that is to say, I do not have Man-Thing, so I have not looked super hard into the card, but it's not something that is super impressive. It's basically, I would say, like akin to a Mobius or a Spiderham in that the decks that use it don't need it. However, it's in worse decks than Spiderham is even in. And I could honestly see moving Man-Thing down to D tier. I know that there's data behind it, and I know that it's reasonable against both Thanos and different potential Hope Summers decks. Yeah, I guess Man-Thing probably does deserve the D spot. I know that it's like a fine card if you just look at the stats, and it can just slide into a variety of different things, especially a variety of different Zabu things. It's just not super exciting to me, so yeah, probably D. I think that that's probably a reasonable space for it. And next we're going to look at our, this should be like this. Oh, this is wrong. Hold on one moment here. I've got to recorrect this graphic. That should do it. Perfect. Cannonball. So on reveal, move the highest power enemy card here away. If you can't, destroy it with a rock. That wording might be off. It might say like replace it with a rock, but destroy it with a rock. I guess that's fine. It's flavorful. The rock is what kills it, and then the rock shows up in its place. I think that this card is horrible. I think that this card is possibly going to be the worst card in the game for a variety of different reasons. So it is trying to destroy the highest power enemy card. In order for that to truly be relevant, either you need Limbo, or you need like your opponent to be cheating out a big card that is relevant for you to Cannonball, or you need to play this on the final turn of the game without priority. And if on the final turn of the game without priority, the best play that you have is Cannonball, I think you're just asking to lose. This is basically, I mean, if your goal is to hit like Onslaught or something like that, which is really the only big card that has to get moved. It's Onslaught and then it's Blob, which can't get moved and then gets auto-destroyed. Talk about Blob in a second. If your goal is just to like kill Onslaught, then I think you're better off just fighting it with other cards. And I don't think it's super reasonable to expect this to destroy things. So you're really just looking at like an expensive, weird Juggernaut. I feel like I do have to talk more about this card because I've seen a few people so far think that it's potentially okay. It's really not. The main reason is Shang-Chi is just an absurd card. Maybe if this card cost less and Shang-Chi cost more and Shang-Chi wasn't as good at doing what it does, then Cannonball would have a shot to see play. That doesn't mean that maybe you couldn't play Cannonball alongside Shang-Chi, except I still don't even think that that moves the needle because Cannonball I think is just so bad of a rate for what you're actually trying to do, which, let's be clear, is move a card. Blob aside, all this thing does is move a card. Move Miss Marvel, sure. That might trip your opponent up if you curve this out on turn 5 and move their Miss Marvel. Otherwise though, like, what are you doing moving one of your opponent's expensive cards? You're trying to win that location, but then you're losing the location of wherever you move the card to, and you can't predict it, and you need to not have priority. This thing is kind of like an Arrow, but I think that Arrow hasn't really been super good recently for a variety of reasons. Both of this and Arrow only move one card, and now many decks either don't care where they play on the final turn of the game, or they are playing to every location on the final turn of the game with a bunch of reduced cost things or getting a bunch of energy out of their thing. So for those variety of reasons, hopefully I touched on all of the points that I had meant to. I really just don't think that Cannonball actually does anything, to be honest, other than maybe kill Blob, which is relevant if they ramp out a Blob either with a Lockjaw or with a Corvus or something potentially, or with what's the other way you can ramp out a Blob? I guess just like having priority and playing Blob first, but then you have to predict where the Blob is going, which isn't super useful. As a means to kill Blob, sure, if you want to play something that costs more than Shang-Chi or more than double of Shadow King, I guess. But that's like a very specific answer to a very good card. Blob is a good card, but Shadow King is like such a more applicable card that also is much more likely to be relevant if your opponent doesn't have Blob. I don't see, anyway, even if you like remove Shadow King and Shang-Chi from the game, I still don't think that Cannonball is good because I just don't think the rate of 5 energy for a card that is really just trying to answer Blob is relevant at all. So I think that this card is going to be one of the worst cards in the game. Unfortunately, I am going to have to open for it though, because it's coming out alongside Miss Marvel, which I'm putting at S tier for similar reasons to Pixie. However, if I said like you could put Mobius in any deck and Spiderham in any deck and they're okay, Miss Marvel is like that, but if you don't put it in your deck, then your deck is bad. This card's rate is just absurd. It is a 4/14, basically, with Zabu. The build around restriction is quite good. This card, I'm sure it's many people that are free to play and have been free to play, or at least were free to play when this card initially launched, are super excited to finally be able to pick it up. I'm definitely going to be opening during Miss Marvel week, and this is where my Spotlight, if I get 5 Spotlight keys this week, it took me 3 to open up Pixie. It might take me another 2 to open up Miss Marvel on average. Plus, I've got some stockpiled from not opening in November and December of last year, and not opening for that much of anything last month either. And that's all going to go to Miss Marvel, and I'm happy about that. Does mean I might get to experiment a little bit less with some other new cards coming out. But it's been one of the best cards in the game for going on half a year. I believe that this card came out in last October, it had to be last October, because then November I think was Elsa, and February or December was Sebastian Shaw. So I believe that Miss Marvel came out in October and Loki was September. I believe all of that checks out. But we're not doing a quiz here right now. We're doing a tier list, and I think Miss Marvel goes at the top of the tier list. If I'm ordering within the tiers, which I kind of have been, Miss Marvel I think is one of the best cards in the game. Now, part of that is the fact that Zabu is actually the best card in the game, but with Zabu, Miss Marvel, or with Sarah, Miss Marvel becoming a 4 or a 3/14 is just absurd. That is Mockingbird levels of power. That is a Mockingbird level threat. And the only reason that Mockingbird seems close to reasonable is because Miss Marvel is absolutely absurd. So one of the best cards in the game. Will definitely be picking it up. It doesn't get played in like Thanos decks. It doesn't get played in every Hope Summers deck, maybe, but it's still really good in a wide variety of options. Kitty Pryde is a really interesting card. I'm going to slap this one on B tier with an asterisk. This is a very good card if you got Hope Summers, if you got the season pass. Without that, Kitty Pryde has not really been playable in a little bit, but it is very, very good Kitty Pryde along with Hope and Elsa and Angela, all of these cards are like not that strong, but the reason that these cards were all kind of nerfed to the power level that they were at, because the devs know the cards. The devs are probably working on cards already for like next October. They probably have got some cards drafted up for 2026. You know, they knew Hope was coming and nerfed Kitty Pryde appropriately for that time period. That said, Kitty Pryde is still busted alongside the season pass card, not really playable without the season pass card for the most part. There are some people that have played Kitty Pryde in Shuri. It's not the best thing that you can do though, all in all, but it is very good with Hope, so that's definitely something to consider. And then moving on, we have what I think is many players' picks for top card of the season. There's been a lot of discussion around this card because people weren't exactly sure how it worked, and then once they got confirmation for how it actually works, they got very excited. So if you aren't already familiar, if you haven't seen all of the discourse online ahead of time, it's Jeff's text. Until the end of next turn, nothing can stop you from playing cards anywhere. There's a lot of implications of that. It doesn't stop you. It removes the drawbacks from Infinite and Giganto. Those are huge ones if you want to play this thing on turn 5. It also removes the drawback both possible ways, the ongoing and the play restriction of Ebony Maw. You can play Ebony Maw on turns 5, 4, or 6 after playing War Machine, or you can play cards into Ebony Maw, which otherwise has ongoing to lock you out of that location. So all of that's really cool. It also allows you to play to Professor X, both yours and your opponent's, as well as Goose and Storm, and all of that's pretty sweet. One thing that I did see that I think is a pretty cool synergy potentially is, and this was by Lauren Whatevs on Twitter, she said that you can turn 3 Storm, turn 4 War Machine anywhere, and then turn 5 Legion onto the flooded location, turning all 3 locations into flooded, and then there's no turn 6, effectively. You can still play Jeff, but for the most part, the game's over. And you can also still soak into Sunspot and Nebula, those kinds of things. Point is, you get to turn all locations flooded immediately by playing Legion onto the flooded location, which is pretty cool. And definitely there are some cool plays that you can make with this card, but I'm still gonna slot it right about here. And I think that it might even be less important than Kitty Pryde if you have Hope Summers. So I think War Machine probably lives right here at the end of B tier. I do think it's going to be good and cool, but I think that what is overstated is the ease of playing this card on your curve. I think that that is the part that is really going to be awkward, because like, one of the cool things about Jeff is you can always, you can move it, of course, but you can also play a turn 5 Professor, and then you can still play that turn 6 Jeff if you need to, if you weren't able to play it early, and add more power into Professor X. War Machine doesn't give you that same luxury, and also is much more telegraphed than Jeff. Jeff has the upside of like final turn of the game, you play it into Sanctum Sanctorum. Pretty cool. War Machine, you are going to have to play War Machine on turn 5, which isn't like a great turn 5. That only leaves you with 1, maybe 2 more energy if you have Zabu, and you can't really make the most out of War Machine plus Zabu because you're not playing War Machine on the final turn of the game alongside another 4-cost card. So this is like a good 4, a well-designed 4 in the way that it doesn't have immediate Zabu synergies. People are going to play it on turn 5 with Zabu alongside a different 2-cost card. I don't know exactly what that would be if that isn't Jeff. But all of that is to say I don't think that War Machine is the hype that it has necessarily drawn. But I think that it is still pretty good. I just don't think that it's better than Mockingbird, and I don't think it's as interesting as Pixie. So assuming you only get to open 2 cards and you don't really care about Pixie this season, I would honestly potentially pick up Mockingbird and then consider skipping the other 3, especially if you are really low on Spotlight caches for new cards, maybe because you need Miss Marvel as well. Then you want to pick up like Miss Marvel plus Mockingbird, which aren't really a combo in conjunction with each other. It is one other thing to kind of think about. If you are going to be content picking up Miss Marvel, Mockingbird doesn't go into the same decks that Miss Marvel does. You don't play Miss Marvel in Thanos lists, so you could maybe hold off on Mockingbird too. And these are all just things that you have to think about, because the more you are willing to be frugal with your Spotlight keys, the more you're going to be allowed to be flexible in future seasons. Because I've been frugal in the past, I'm probably going to get all 4 cards this month, just because Miss Marvel, I'm sure I will open up the Cannonball before I open up Miss Marvel. The other 3 cards I think are powerful enough that I probably want them. But I think that War Machine can definitely be skipped, but that's the other thing. Feel free to wait until the weekend and see what decks people are posting and what kind of win rates people are posting with these cards, and just make a more informed decision based off that information. Silk is a pretty good card, but it's not quite Kitty Pryde levels. Kitty Pryde might honestly be up here if we are being serious. Yeah, maybe it's something like this, because Kitty Pryde is really, really good with Hope right now, but again, not great otherwise. So maybe we do something like this. I think Silk is just like a really solid card. It also obviously works with Hope. It is not a move card, but it's just a 2/5, and just a 2/5 is good. So put some respect on Silk for sure. And then last up, we have Silver Samurai, which doesn't really feel like it should be at this position. It has pretty good data right now on Untapped, And I think that's because people were using Silver Samurai last season to discard blobs and reanimate them. I don't think it's that great though, and it possibly even goes down to here because it just seems like there's so much of a drop off between that and Spiderham. Maybe even like this is a pretty well-rounded tier list. It seems a little bit harsh to put a bunch of cards down at D tier, but you can only put 12 cards in your deck in Marvel Snap, and you don't need every card. I think that that's like an important lesson to take away as well. You can't play Miss Marvel and play Mockingbird in the same deck, right? So do you need both of them this month? Maybe not. Maybe you'll still want both of them for some potential other cards, though maybe by the time you get around to playing Mockingbird, they'll have nerfed it anyways. I'm not sure, but that is my initial take for Avengers vs. X-Men. Let me know what you think of the new cards and the returning cards appearing in Spotlight Caches this season. But for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.